Hey, deserving listeners, this is part 2 in my reaction series in which I react as I watch the documentary on Netflix called Unknown Number, The High School Catfish. Let's continue watching.
Lauren, can you come in?
I'm pretty good.
How are you doing today? Good.
Wow. So at the same visit, they're going to inform Lauren that it was her mom. I wonder if Lauren suspects it is her mom. I wouldn't be surprised because if, as I've been saying, if the mom, Kendra, it sounds like she's confessing to it, then it would not be isolated to just that behavior. In all likelihood, those close to her would say, yeah, this kind of makes sense because she's done this before, she's done this before, so let's see what happens.
Your mom comes back out. We're going to chat for a few minutes, okay? All right, Miss Lauren, so I'm just going to start the conversation.
I guess I should say the reason why I'm wondering, and there's no way to know from a documentary, that Kendra might be suffering from sadistic personality with Machiavellianism, but not psychopathy, not antisocial, is because of her reaction when she was confronted. She seemed ashamed. She seemed to feel guilty about it. And the fact that she even confessed to it. If she were psychopathic, typically they would not confess. One of the reasons why suspects will confess is because they don't want to lie and they care about the investigator, even though they might not have ever met that person. We just have a natural sense of wanting to please other people. All of us do, aside from psychopaths and antisocial people. So the fact that she confessed to it so fast, the look on her face, the fact that she didn't run out of the house or say, it wasn't me, I don't know what you're talking about, you guys are framing me, that's typical what will happen. So that's why I'm wondering if she actually does have at least some empathy, but has sadistic personality with Machiavellianism.
Mom got wrapped up into some stuff, and she didn't start it, but continued it. So we found some evidence, and we have a search warrant. We're going to take her phone and stuff. Sometimes when we're not thinking straight, we do some things that aren't right.
The police officer is being extremely vague. I think Lauren is like, what is happening? This is a very disturbing. Why is the mom not in handcuffs? Why is she allowed to be here in this moment? That mom needs to be separated from that child.
Your mom doesn't want this to get out, but it is some public information, so it's not going to not get out. I just want to be honest.
Now, I don't blame the police officer, the law enforcement officer, for not having articulate ways I don't think anyone would. To be a law enforcement officer, you have to have a lot of skills as a foundation. How to handle a situation like this probably isn't something they train on and something they have experience with. But you would just think there would be some kind of procedure to, at the very least, say, Mom, go outside, or hey, Lauren, let's step outside, talk with her alone. Because another part of this is that investigation is occurring right now. Lauren's reaction right now will be some of the evidence, right? And if the mom weren't around, maybe Lauren would have a different reaction when she's told. She might say like, oh, that makes sense. But with the mom right there, like on top of her, Lauren might not feel comfortable to do that. You know what I mean? Right?
Mom doesn't want this to get out, but it is some public information, so it's not going to not get out. I just want to be honest about it, all right? She said you had no idea what was going on, and I believe that. What has to happen now is I have to make sure you and your mom are safe before I leave. So I'd like you to call your dad.
Oh, I guess the other option is that Lauren knew and they were working together or something. Police seem to be suggesting that possibility, I think.
Well, it's over with. It's done.
May I ask you, what phone did you take?
She had it in her pocket. I can show you. So.
She got a couple.
Okay. Well, I have a search warrant for all of them, so I'd like to get all.
Interesting. So the husband, Sean, is just being informed, and he came home and he just revealed that Kendra has more than one phone, maybe two, maybe three, which would make sense, right?
She lost, both of her jobs, and she hasn't had a job in over a year. She hasn't had a job for over a year.
You just said she let go.
That's
Tell me she quit.
I was told by somebody I know over there that she was let go. She was no longer.
Okay, so we're potentially hearing more ticks in the column of a general personality of psychopathy, lack of empathy, Machiavellianism. There's another possibility, actually, that is completely separate from the dark tetrad of psychopathy, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and sadism, and that is passive-aggressive personality disorder. It's another personality disorder that is no longer included in our diagnostic manual, which is annoying to me on some level. But I've done a whole deep dive, if you want to listen to it, on passive-aggressive personality disorder. In a nutshell, for these people, when they were growing up, they were mistreated in a way that made them feel that they had no ability to communicate or indicate their anger or being upset about something. So a typical scenario, and not everyone with passive-aggressive personality disorder as an adult would go through something exactly like this, but you have a 5-year-old that is cranky and doesn't want to eat the food that they're given. And there's various different reactions from parents around this, but for the people with passive-aggressive personality, they consistently had a terrorizing reaction from one or both of the parents that shut down any indication that they could communicate, they could spontaneously even have a feeling of like, I don't want to do this right now, or I don't like this, or this is upsetting, or hey, that's mine, I want to play with that. Some kind of power, because everyone deserves power on some level, agency, right? Boundaries. Kids are sometimes wrong about their assertions, right? If they want to not go to school or something, it's not like they necessarily have that right. But kids will communicate. They'll indicate. There'll be a facial expression. There'll be a crankiness or something. And for these caregivers, they will come down hard and consistently and abusive and terrorizing to the point where neurologically the kid, as they have the indication of like, I don't like this in any context, there's a neurological reaction that shuts that down. But the need is still there, and it's building up over time because the need for agency, power, control, to fight back, to get what they need or want in life is still there, and it's being frustrated and never being able to be met. Again, that approach gets translated to all relationships. So they go to school. They don't indicate that these individuals are often described as some of the nicest people on the planet, but they are very not nice because they have a boiling cauldron of anger and resentment and aggression and hostility that is often not even known to them. So the reason why we call it passive aggressive is because all that hostility or aggression is there, and they've learned they have to communicate it passively or in a hidden way, sometimes even from themselves because they're in denial of it. And so for these individuals, their behavior can appear psychopathic, can appear antisocial or sadistic. Like I had a client once, I'm changing details about this to obscure identity, as I always do. But what she did was she had an authority figure in her life, like school or work or something. And this authority figure was very important to her, my client. My client looked up to her, almost thought of her as kind of like a mentor or a mom or something. And so transference occurs where the displacement of the anger at her mom gets displaced onto this authority figure. And she started to kind of obsess about this mentor, and all of that aggression and hostility wanted to come out, wanted to go to mom, but was being displaced or transferred to this authority figure. And so what she did was very Machiavellian and sadistic and looking psychopathic because she would break into, and she was very good because she learned at a very young age. These people can sometimes be extremely good at figuring out how to get around authority and avoid being caught because they learned when they have anger, they have to slow down, but they will get their justice, but they have to do it in a hidden way, often to everyone involved. So say, for instance, my client felt like the mentor wasn't giving her enough attention or something like that. And instead of just saying, hey, you're not giving me enough attention, or hey, I didn't like that thing you said, or just reaching out to her, hey, let's hang out or something. that anger is all being stuffed down, never indicated even to themselves. And so they have to get back. And it's completely dysfunctional, right? Because they want contact with the mentor, but they have this boiling anger and all this. And so what she did is she would break into the mentor's office and figured out how to break into her computer and would just kind of browse around. She wouldn't even do anything. She wouldn't delete anything or find evidence. She just would sit in the desk and would rummage around in the desk and would rummage around in the computer, and it felt satisfying to her. And then she would close everything up, and she did this multiple times. And the way she described it to me was that she was obsessed, and it just felt like she had to do it to get back at her, and she didn't really even know why she had to get back at her. Now, that's kind of an extreme example, but there are other examples, like a spouse might cheat chronically because, we all get angry at our spouse sometimes, or upset about something. Hey, I didn't like that. But if you have no ability to even indicate on your face or indicate spontaneously or communicate anything about that, and, all of us have some level of conflict avoidance, but these people, they don't even know what's happening is the thing, pre-awareness, pre-therapy. And so they'll have this buildup of anger. And of course, they have a lifetime of anger that's boiling inside of them. And their spouse is mildly annoying to them, but it'll just be the last straw on that boiling cauldron, to mix metaphors. And then they don't indicate anything on their face. They don't seem upset, and they just quietly start to go on Tinder and they have sex with someone else, and they're only doing it because they're trying to get back at their spouse. They don't want to cheat. They don't even enjoy it. And they often, in this process, will hate themselves while they're doing it because it's a repetition of what they were going through when they were kids, when they were wrong, when the parent was coming down on them. And they're causing themselves to be wrong again. And then there's an internal, the superego is coming down on them and saying, you're wrong again. There's a lot of suffering, but they also cause a lot of suffering. And when they're caught, they don't have any of the signs of a psychopath. They appear very nice. They have empathy, but it's modified empathy, or their empathy can be easily eclipsed by the drastic need of the anger to come out in a hidden way. I hope this is all making sense. I'm compacting hours and hours of lecture into a short period of time. So for these people, like I was talking about sadism, Machiavellianism, because we haven't seen any indication of, in terms of the dark tetrad, we haven't seen any indication of narcissism. It could be there, but and the way she reacted, it didn't appear to be psychopathic. But we'll watch. But it appeared to have that sadism and that Machiavellianism, right? And those people, there are that, right? These people often are monsters. They're exploitative. They're harmful. They're abusive. They're often criminals. There's that personality problem, but passive-aggressive personality can look like that, even though they do have empathy, and it can be very confusing. So the way that Sean is reacting, the husband, the fact that she's just even in a marriage indicates that she probably isn't a sadistic psychopath, because those individuals will just cause a wake of harm around them that causes people to get away from them. You know what I mean? So the fact that he's reacting like, what? And the fact of how secretive and how chronic it was, right? Now, in all likelihood, if this is an accurate construct or label or personality hypothesis for the mom, which we'll never know from watching this, then in all likelihood, the hidden aggression, hostility, and harm had been happening in various ways throughout her life, ever since she learned how to let out that anger in a hidden way. Sometimes it starts to become sophisticated at the age of like 10, 12, 13. And we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And for these people, they often get away with it, again, because they're not psychopathic, they're not impulsive, they are thinkers. These people, sometimes they'll say, I always wanted to be a private investigator, or I always wanted to be a CIA agent, or a computer hacker. Not everyone wants to be those professions or a passive-aggressive personality, but they have a lot of interest in being sneaky, in getting away with things, in being able to infiltrate, just because unknown to them, they have an attraction to that because they need that. But they also will engage in it. Sometimes it's shoplifting when they don't really need to shoplift. like I said, cheating, breaking into houses, spying on people, hacking into phones, hacking into computers, bullying from afar, that kind of thing. So we'll add that to the list of hypotheses that we'll never really get much data on because it's just a documentary.
Tell me the truth.
It's time to get it off your shoulders.
If I go and ask it when they leave, I'll probably go to jail. So tell me how.
I got let go from it.
Yeah. What about the Texas job? You still have that, or you got terminated from that?
I don't have that.
You don't have that either.
No.
So who knows? And I don't know if we'll get the data, but there's a possibility that her disorder, whatever it is, was a factor in her being fired from 2 different jobs. But we are hearing that she was lying for a long time. Sounds like a year, maybe longer, to her husband about her employment. And that's interesting, right? That 1, she would do that. 2, that she could get away with it. That's what's really fascinating about this, is just how long she got away with these things. And I just wonder what else she's getting away with, right? Like if I were the husband, oh my God. I mean, how could you ever recover from even just what he's learned in the past 5 minutes?
Telling me the truth, or you're lying. When did you give up? Go from there.
Same time.
So you've been lying to me for like 6 months, a year. You haven't been working for Texas.
Right.
And again, she's immediately confessing, which is not typical for psychopaths or antisocial people. The reason why I say that is because psychopaths, because since they were very young, they have a pattern and a need to lie, sometimes what we call pathologically sometimes, but they will act impulsively. They don't plan for the future. And if they can lie and get away with it, even if it just buys them 5 minutes, they'll often do it. And that's why we call it pathological, because it's done when they don't hardly ever get away with it. So she lied for a long time, so that looks psychopathic. But then the fact that she immediately confesses when she is caught, right? And caught is even one way of putting it. Another way of putting it is she suggested that she might have lied, right? For psychopaths and for people on the spectrum of antisocial, they have a pattern of lying very quickly, and they just learn, when in doubt, lie, because they create such a web of lies around them that they can't keep any of it straight. And so they shoot themselves in the foot by doing this, but in the moment, they will lie even when later it's obvious that they are lying, right? So in this moment, the bosses that fired her aren't in the room. So she could, if she were a psychopath, if she were antisocial, she could say like, no, that's not what happened. The police have it wrong. Or whatever my bosses told the police, it was misunderstood. That's typically what a psychopath will do, even when it's obvious down the road that they were going to get caught. So the fact that she immediately confesses without any ambiguity about it, and the look on her face, she appears to be like, oh, I'm caught. Almost like a child, right? Almost like the way maybe she is frequently feeling as a child because of the abuse she went through. I don't know. I'm really making up a story here, but it is particular how quickly she is confessing to all of this.
I can't do it anymore. We got a house, this house. Now I know what the truth is. And having her in the middle, it's not good. Okay, you need to call your parents. Here's my phone. You need to go. You need to call your parents. No. Well, he's here. No. You need to go.
Yeah. And just the harm for Lauren. She just has this blank look on her face. And I just wonder what's going through her. I mean, shock, right? But in all likelihood, Kendra has been doing things for a long time. Now, I want to point out that I don't know what's happening, but if it is passive-aggressive personality, even at the severe end of the spectrum, these individuals do love. They can love the way everyone else does. Sometimes even more so because of what they went through growing up. And so there's a possibility that as she is hugging her daughter, that it's genuine, that it's real, that it's just the way all of us would feel. Watching this, I imagine most people would say, like, that can't be real. How could you have done that to your daughter and embrace her in this way and have that face of love and concern, those two things can't live within the same person. That's false. One, even psychopaths can love. The problem is that 30 years ago, no one knew about psychopathy in the general public, or very few people did. Once they learned about it, they kind of melded it together with narcissism, and then it just became a narcissist. But there's a general understanding that there's a type of person out there who lacks empathy. You know, shows like Dexter or, I don't know, other kinds of shows. And these are cartoon extreme versions or one particular example. But for experts in personality, we understand that there's a wide variety, and there's different knobs that are some up, some down. So the empathy knob is down on psychopathy, but maybe not all the way down. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have attachment needs, because that can be separate. They're related, but they're not necessarily the same thing. So someone can lack empathy, but still really need attachments, right? But the cartoon version is they don't need attachments. They don't care about humans. They're like robots, and that's not true. Anyway. So there's that, but also there are completely other explanations, personality-wise, as to why someone would act sadistically or psychopathically, you know, in terms of what she has confessed to here. Other than psychopathy, other than antisocial, other than sadistic personality, other than dark tetrad. There are other reasons as to why someone would do this. It could be a simple story of very difficult trauma that the mother went through, and it just had this weird defensive flowchart in her head, and what came out of her was the text towards her daughter. You know, those things happen. Take it from me as a therapist that have worked with personality and with many, many clients on many, many issues. There's a lot of roads to problematic behavior.
You gotta go. Okay, I'll call.
But anyway, my original point was how much suffering Lauren has been through, even though she might have been raised fairly well, but there's probably been a theme of Kendra, the mom, involving some of her passive-aggressive personality impulses or needs towards Lauren, towards the dad. Either Lauren has witnessed it or has been a victim of it. That'll happen sometimes. You know, in the course of being a parent, there are moments when you get angry or frustrated or bothered or annoyed with your kid. And if you have no personality or neurological ability to even notice or process or differentiate or figure out what to do with that even little bit of anger, it piles up and it has to come out in a hidden, passive way, sometimes even towards your kid. So that's true, then the passive hostility would likely have been occurring throughout Lauren's life, not just when she was a teen and she was getting the texts. Who knows? Yeah, I'm making up a lot of story based on almost no data, but I'm just trying to list out in my mind the hypotheses that I would be trying to gather more data on if this was a case I was working on.
For a second, please.
You know, I can't do this, Kendra. I'm sorry.
I can't leave her.
No, are you done?
No. I can't.
Another tick in the column of passive-aggressive personality is, in terms of the edit, we're not seeing any apology from the mom. It's interesting how it's difficult to explain this to people. It's easier to show. So with passive-aggressive individuals, and I'm not talking about passive-aggressive the way that people typically use it. People typically use the phrase passive-aggressive when they're just referring to passive things or aggressive things, but rarely passive-aggressive. But anyway, so but this is passive-aggressive personality. And I think the way that people typically use it today in common speech, passive-aggressive, like, oh, he's so passive-aggressive, I think it was actually co-opted from the clinical language because the passive-aggressive personality construct has been around for decades. Anyway, so what's interesting about the mom that does fit the profile of someone with passive-aggressive personality is that if you just looked at it and you allowed yourself to accept the possibility that she does have empathy, I'm seeing a lot of indicators of empathy and care and love towards your daughter, which I'm sure for a lot of viewers would say that's impossible, but it is possible. It might be faked, it might not be real, but there's a lot of indicators there. The other thing that I'm noticing is there aren't any apologies. There's no shame. if someone else were caught, if a non-psychopath or a non-passive aggressive person, someone that didn't have whatever it's going on with the mom, there would be shame. There would just be like, oh my God, Lauren, I'm so sorry that I did that to you, or something, right? You can kind of see it on our face, but it's the way that a child would feel or react, right? Children, 3-year-olds, 7-year-olds, when they're caught and they're ashamed and they're just, oh my God, I did that thing. They don't have the capacity to understand the other person's feelings because they're children. So they're guilty and they feel bad and they care in a way, but especially if the other person's an adult, they don't really feel like they are responsible for correcting the situation. We don't want kids to feel that way. We want them to be a little bit more self-centered so that they can, focus on themselves and develop. Later, they'll develop that. So for these passive-aggressive people, they will have that dichotomy. They'll have that paradox. They will appear nice and caring and concerned and guilty and ashamed, but they won't apologize. They don't say, I'm sorry I did it, or here's why I did it, because they don't really know why they did it. And the passive aggression and their developmental issues, personality-wise, actually limit their ability to really fully grasp how responsible they are for other people's feelings. And so they'll exhibit, so it can be very confusing if you're involved with someone like this, because one, there's no talk about it on the internet. As far as I know, I might be the only online clinician that talks about passive aggressive personality in the way that it should be talked about. That's probably not true because there's more and more clinicians online, which is a good thing, but I often see it, especially in the way that it should be talked about. Anyway, so it can often look like this, where the individual. So if you're in Lauren's shoes, or you're married, if you're Sean, it can be very, very confusing because you're looking at the person. And I know that she's nice, and I know that she cares, or at least I thought she cared. There's a lot of because if she were a psychopath, antisocial, this wouldn't be a surprise. Especially to the husband, he would say, yeah, well, she's a pathological liar, so this fits. Like if you watched the Who the Fuck Did I Marry TikTok series, I reacted to that too, with, I think her name was Risa Tisa on TikTok. If I remember right, the husband that she married, of whom she referred to as Who the Fuck Did I Marry, appeared to be a psychopathic con artist. I can't know that, but that's just the way she was describing it. And the way she was describing it had all the hallmarks of that. And when he was confronted, he continued to lie, even though it was obvious he was lying, right? Well, when he was caught by Risa Tisa on some of the lies, the way she talked about it, she was like, well, this kind of makes sense because he has all of these problems. I've caught him lying to me from my memory. At least that's typical. For psychopaths, for people that accidentally or unfortunately fall into an entanglement with a psychopath, once they start to see obvious examples of deception and harm and psychopathy and lack of empathy, they often can trace things back and say like, oh, that explains all those other things. Whereas with passive-aggressive people, they're so good at hiding it, and they do have empathy, and their hidden hostility is so hidden that when you discover stuff like this, you're just like, wait, I mean, it's very confusing and very crazy making, So I don't know if that's what's happening to Lauren or to the audience watching the show, Not that they're attached to Kendra, but watching it like, I don't understand what's happening. But it is a compelling hypothesis.
We got to work through this. We just got to be separated for a little while.
Miss Lauren, I'm so sorry that I had to knock on your door today, and I hope you guys find a path, all right?
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, I'm really interested in hearing what she's going to say here. She could be a good actor. She could be lying. It could be edited funny. So we'll make sure that we consider that. But it is interesting because so much can be revealed by what she will say in the documentary.
Sorry. I'm sorry. You guys are gonna think I'm the crazy lady.
So, I don't know, but for passive-aggressive people, they will have various different ways of justifying it to themselves, but at the foundational level, they don't feel like they did anything wrong, but they will sometimes intellectually admit that they are doing something wrong. But it won't feel wrong to them because a 5-year-old doesn't feel wrong when they throw a tantrum at their parents for not letting them have another cookie. It feels right to 5-year-olds because they're immature and they're children. For people with passive-aggressive personality, that has been retained, or they haven't developed beyond that. And so they can sometimes admit what they did and not feel that, because how could she have done it for almost 2 years if she had empathy, if she knew it was wrong, right? It's one thing to intellectually know, like, oh, I'm pretty sure this is wrong, or I know I shouldn't be doing this, but there's a compulsion to do it. And people with passive-aggressive personality almost never understand why they have this compulsion to do these hidden hostilities towards others. But you know, maybe she'll say something else that'll get me off of this main hypothesis. All right, well, let's adjourn there for now. That's the end of part 2. Tune in next time when I continue watching this documentary. This is a very interesting story. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.